Armored Core 6 has a lot of preset mechs, and you've probably never used a single one of them. Well, I have. In fact, I'm close to beating the game with each of the preset data you receive from the arena fights, so let me tell you all about them. I will be going up the list starting from the last one, because that's the order I played with them, assuming the ones at the bottom should be the best. How wrong I was. This ranking will consider the overall effectiveness of the entire package, as well as a little bit of how fun it is to use. I will also only be talking about the single-player campaign. The choices I was making across these playthroughs are the choices I thought this character would have made in my stead. This had a significant impact on the challenges I faced. This game revolves a lot around building your own mech, but what if you can't really be bothered to figure it all out and just want a quick way to jump into the game? Well, that's where presets should come in. They're meant to be a quick way to approach some playstyle or concept without forcing a player to build a new AC every time. They should be decent enough for someone to want to pick them, but will never be excellently suited towards whatever your current mission is, because they've been made ahead of time. Well, as we'll find out across the series of videos, this goal has not been achieved. Many of these ACs are significantly worse than what even a below-average gamer would conjure up themselves. Some of them are a weird hodgepodge of various parts, which don't synergize well and just aren't suited for any particular purpose. However, each of these ACs represents a real character from the campaign that we encounter. Therefore, I think the real purpose of these builds is whatever the mission designer wanted for them to achieve in the game. With this in mind, I'm not going to be rating these ACs compared to the best meta builds the community has created. Instead, they will be on a scale relative to only each other. I'm basically pretending there is no feature to build your machine yourself and you're stuck with the presets. Let's get started. Echo. I started with the bottom of the list, assuming we would follow a general trend of decreasing quality and therefore increasing difficulty. However, this is absolutely not how it went. This is the AC that Air pilots during the All-Mind boss battle alongside us. We've got a Coral Rifle as our primary firearm. It deals decent damage, but not a lot of stagger, has a low rate of fire and the projectiles are quite slow. Coupled with the machine having the Ocellus FCS, for some fucking reason, it's actually quite difficult to land shots. The rifle can charge up an alternate attack, which consumes twice the ammo and deals respectable damage. It also doesn't immediately force the gun into cooldown, unlike most charged attacks. However, it takes a bit too long to charge up and forces you to stand still while firing, which makes it quite risky to use. Oh, and as if that wasn't enough, the ammo capacity is quite low, so using this as a primary weapon even on missions of average length will leave you accidentally punching the enemies at the end. The Coral Oscillator is virtually identical to the Moonlight Blade weapon, but better. It can fire up to 2 fairly quick slashes in succession, or slowly charge up this wide arc with a shorter range. It doesn't consume ammo, but goes into cooldown every time you use it. It's not very long, thankfully, but this weapon just doesn't do anything very well, beyond never running out of ammo. The last offensive option is this Coral Missile. It deals huge damage but is slow as all hell and never seems to hit anything. It takes an eternity to lock on and another eternity to charge up. I really don't like this weapon because it seems to just never be able to hit any somewhat mobile target. And the fourth unit is this Coral Shield. I never really got to grips with the shields in this game. The damage they mitigate doesn't really seem worth sacrificing a weapon for. Plus, I find it more fun to try and just avoid the attack altogether. This shield is special in that it covers you from all angles, but the protection is underwhelming as a result. As far as the frame goes, we've got a light-ish weight ephemera set. The total AP comes out to just under 10k, which is nothing to scoff at. No major complaints there. However, I am unimpressed with the mobility. The Gills booster has decent stats on paper, but it doesn't offer the kind of crazy acceleration values of the Alula kind. The FCS is Ocellus, which is the FCS I'd pick if I wanted to choose the worst possible option. It excels for close-range aim assist, but the weapons on this AC are more geared towards mid-range. The assists for the other ranges are dogshite, as is the lock-on correction, which really diminishes the value of the coral missile. When playing with this AC, I kind of got used to the reticle drunkenly flying around the screen, desperately trying to lock on to the target. The generator is one of 2 coral generators in this game, and they are of a very eccentric breed. They boast great capacities and EN output, but the recovery values are terrible. When waiting to recover some energy, you will be able to go outside, mow your lawn, do your groceries, and it still won't have started to recover. However, this goes for if you haven't emptied the supply. If you do, the energy will still take forever to come back, but at least you will immediately gain most of it back. Therefore, the most effective way to use this generator is to always empty your supply entirely. This is problematic. I'm used to not emptying my energy, so when playing with this AC, I have to constantly think of doing additional actions that I don't actually want to do in order to empty my fuel tank. Having to do 1 or 2 additional quick boosts when I don't actually need to can sometimes be dangerous in of itself. Regardless, this generator will still require you to sit out long timeouts, unable to do anything, and that's why I'm not in love with it. At least the energy firearm spec is higher than most generators, but it's not all that much either. And finally, the expansion. Pulse protection creates a large stationary barrier that covers you from incoming damage. This option has grown in my esteem over my playtime because it's more flexible than it might seem. Neither you nor the enemy are limited in their movement, but the sphere protects from all damage, regardless of if it's coming from the outside or inside. You can leave the sphere and the enemy can enter it, but as long as you have the wall in between the two of you, you're safe. It lasts longer and can protect you from more damage than pulse armor. This isn't necessarily the best option, but it works well for its purpose. Remember, air is meant to support you in the last fight, and this expansion is the only way she can directly protect you. That's the purpose of this AC in general, so that air has a representation. However, I am rating this machine as it is in the hands of the player. All in all, this AC has some situationally powerful weapons, but they don't really work well together. The entire selection doesn't have a clear purpose in mind, they were only chosen because they were coral themed. The internals also really cripple the tenacity and practicality of this machine. I just realized I still haven't corrected this, but in the script the name of this AC is just written as HAL whatever, and because I couldn't be bothered to look up the letters and numbers, so that's how it still is. Anyway, it's Walter, okay. Another coral-themed build, featuring the same generator, missile and shield. The rifle is a little different. It has a much higher ammo capacity, fire rate, and 2 stages of charge. The first charge is just a stronger shot, but the second one emits this huge laser beam, which you can control. The damage on it is not very impressive for how long it takes to charge. It leaves you vulnerable, but at least you can quick boost out of it. Let's talk about ammo capacity. In online discussions about builds in this game, people often seem to only consider weapons and parts in the context of AC or boss battles. However, there is sometimes an entire mission before those. There's missions like Intercept the Red Guns, which often leave lesser equipped builds completely defenseless by the end. In fact, even some longer boss fights, such as All Might, can easily bleed dry your regular laser or plasma rifle. All that's to say, the ammo capacity is actually quite a good thing to have in this game. The other new weapon is this weird thing. A normal attack will use it as a blade for melee strikes. However, the charged attack is this sweeping laser. I'd hazard a guess that these special moves were made mainly to serve as a cool boss fight. This sweep has better range than a melee weapon, but leaves you open to attack for so long. At least it deals a lot of damage, and it can be used to eliminate a group of weaker enemies without having to expend ammo. It's pretty hard to aim though. The frame is a bit more sturdy and stable than that of Echo, but the AC is significantly less mobile. By looking at the booster, you'd think it's the best booster ever. However, one of its problems is this excessively long quick boost duration. It's presented as a good thing by the graphs, but the best way to describe how it feels to be using this machine would be fat rolling in Dark Souls. It just doesn't feel right. I'm not very knowledgeable on what variables affect the movement of the AC, but this preset just doesn't feel as mobile as the part selection screen makes it seem. At least the FCS is better this time round. And finally, the expansion. Assault Armor has grown a lot in my esteem over my playtime. For many preset builds, this is the best punish option they've got, and it does deal a really solid chunk of damage on a staggered enemy. It's also very reliable at staggering them in the first place, but you have to be very close. The AI isn't very good at reacting to this move and doesn't know to run away. My favorite thing about this expansion is that it hard counters pulse armor. If you are close enough, you can react to an AC, activating their protection, in order to immediately break through it and stagger them as well. Extremely satisfying. To sum up, this AC is a step up in terms of weaponry, but it feels far worse to move around. It's about as nimble as a heavyweight, but doesn't have the AP to match. Some of its moves are absolutely devastating. Steel Haze Ortus. Air says this AC was built for mobility, but I don't really see it. It feels more like a fairly average mid-weight biped. The booster is fairly mediocre, as is the generator. Speaking of generator, thank fuck we finally have a generator that feels normal and doesn't ask a million things of you to keep it satisfied. The FCS is the Abbot, specialized for close range, which is appropriate given the weaponry. And the weaponry is pretty good. The Viento is a small pistol-like kinetic weapon. It deals a ton of damage and impact, but has mediocre range, a small magazine and total ammo capacity, along with a reload time that takes forever to complete. It's got to be balanced somehow, I guess. The other major player is the Huxley. It's a little guy you activate, and he flies along with you to fire bullets of his own volition. It deals little damage, but a ton of impact. That's about the best thing I can say about it, because everything else is unimpressive at best. The range is quite small, it takes a long time to activate and deactivate, overheats extremely quickly, and it has a small ammo limit. You cannot pick when it fires either, so it will sometimes completely waste an attack window. The dual needle launchers on the back are a perplexing addition. I'm not really sure what their purpose is supposed to be. They require you to assume stance when firing, but the damage and impact doesn't really match that requirement. Keep in mind that we need to compare this to weapons such as the Songbirds, which also need you to stop moving while firing. There's a little bit of homing with those, but not much. Plus, it takes a long time to lock on. These needles feel too powerful to not require stance, but not powerful enough to expose yourself like that either. However, all of this will come together when we discuss the final weapon. Rusty's signature weapon is the Laser Slicer. It's a melee punisher, which strikes many times per second while extending the enemy's stun to take full damage from the combo. This is pretty effective on its own, but keep in mind the Huxley can keep firing throughout this whole sequence, layering the damage. And on top of that, the needle launcher's short reload time means they will always be ready to fire on a staggered and immobile enemy after the Slicer's combo is done, which also means locking on isn't necessary. These weapons have some really good synergy together, I just wish the melee spec of the arms was higher. To finish on a more disappointing note, the expansion is Terminal Armor. This expansion is easily the worst of the lot. It automatically triggers a shield around you when you would have died and puts you at 1 HP instead. It lasts longer and can absorb more damage than the regular armor, but you can only use it once as opposed to twice, and you cannot pick when it triggers, so it's not possible to use it to shed stagger during a fight. It saved me a couple of times, but the pulse protection saved me more. To try and round it up, the weapons on this AC are not incredible individually, but have a great synergy. They specialize in building stagger and then performing a heavy punish. It's clear the designer of this AC knew what they were doing and had a clear purpose in mind. The only downsides are the low melee spec, a low total ammo supply, the generator's underwhelming capacity, and terminal armor. It's clear the expansion was picked for the purposes of having a cool moment in the boss fight.